What's going on, everybody? It's the Tom Rowland Podcast, brought to you by Brite. And today we have a very interesting guest. Marina Gibson is an angler in the UK. She just wrote this book, Cast, Catch, Release. It's a very good book. It's coming out on June 4th, and I think that is probably about the time that this podcast is going to be released. So you're definitely going to want to check it out. It's not just a regular fishing book. It is a book about how fishing impacts someone's life and directs them, which is what it did for me. I'm sure it's done the same for you in many cases, and it has for Marina. I really like this book, but I really enjoyed the conversation that we had that you're about to hear right now. Even more, she is a very talented angler in the UK, has a lot of perspective, and has been all over the place catching peacock bass, payara, GTs, tarpon, permit, bonefish. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Marina Gibson. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Marina Gibson and I live in the UK. I'm the author of Cast, Catch and Release, and this is the Tom Rowland's podcast.
All right, Marina, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, well, thanks for being on. I got a copy of your book, Cast, Catch, and Release. It's really good. I thought it was really good. I had a good time reading it. I was glad to see that you've been to some amazing places. The jungle, golden dorado, peacock bass. Been to the Seychelles. To Mexico for tarpon and bonefish and permit. Lots of places, plus the Atlantic salmon and all that. That's amazing. You had quite a career already.
Yeah, I do feel truly lucky. I mean, I say to people all the time that fishing takes you to all these amazing places. And if I was in any other job, I would never have traveled to these places. I probably would have gone on beach holidays for a week and lay in the sun. But fishing, I mean, usually I come back with a hand tan and maybe the panda eyes. But I definitely kind of owe it to fishing for taking me to all these amazing places.
Yeah, well, you have an interesting path to fishing that we'll certainly get into. One of the things that I noticed in the book right away, I told you before we started, I have 3 kids myself, but I have two of them are boys, and all of them like to fish, but particularly the boys do more. And my middle son, he just got back from a worldwide trip where he went to, he started in New Zealand, 2 months in New Zealand. And in your book, you were in New Zealand, but I didn't see any fishing in New Zealand. So what do you no fishing in New Zealand? That's the only reason he went.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a depressing story actually, because I went there for 2 years and I probably fished maybe 3 times when I was out there, and that was just with spinning rods. I didn't even fly fish out there.
Yeah.
I was there studying, and I went there in the first place to go and see some friends that I was at school with. And I was only meant to be there for, I think, a month, and I stayed there for 2 years. And, oh, sorry, that's my dog.
That's okay. We're dog friendly around here.
I think I was just mentioned that I had picked up a spin rod 3 times whilst I was out there, but I never even ventured to the South Island. I was in the North Island the whole time. And fishing at that time in my life was really nothing. I mean, I have, all the times where I fished with my family and my mum, but I didn't even think, I remember actually that I knew some people who fished a lot, and I was saying to my boyfriend at the time, please, can you ask them if we can go out in the boat? But it was more for big game fishing. And so that kind of, it was there, and I wanted to do it. But I think that back then I probably thought that I had to have someone helping me, or getting me fishing in the first place. I never thought that I could just independently go. And then when I got back to London, that's when I So maybe it was kind of brewing already in New Zealand.
Yeah, I think that when I read that part of your book about how you went back, you left New Zealand, you went back to London, and there's this part in the book that you can describe far better than me when you're at the store with your mom, and you have a choice of getting one thing or another, which I thought was really super interesting, and a real turning point in your life. And so I want to get into that, but not right now. I want to ask you these questions, which will lighten the mood a little bit. This is the hot seat, okay? So we're going to get to know each other a little bit better, and then we're going to go back into the similar story that you and I both have of kind of maybe getting off track a little bit, and then fishing bringing both of us back in different ways, but kind of similar. And then making a career out of it. I think it's really interesting, and the way that you described it in your book was good. And before we do that, if you don't know about her book, it's Cast, Catch, Release, and that's what it's called: Finding Serenity and Purpose Through Fly Fishing. Marina Gibson, and it's very good. I would highly suggest it, and it's not actually out yet, right? It's gonna. It says on sale June 4th, 2024. So it's coming. It's going to be released probably about the time that we release this podcast. So good. But anyway, all right. So you ready for the hot seat?
Yes.
Okay.
Totally
Well,
ready.
these are really, really serious questions. So you're going to need to put some big time thought into many of them. Some of them you might want to put some thought into. All right. Would you rather drive or fly?
True fly.
Okay. Which is more important, mindset or skill set?
Was it mindset?
That's what I say too. Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Text or call?
Text.
Favorite social media platform?
Instagram.
Do you answer every comment or do you never look at them?
Sometimes I'm good and sometimes I'm bad.
Yeah, me too. Would you rather have 1 million now or 10 million later?
1 million now.
Okay. Do you like freshwater or saltwater better?
Actually, I want to go 10 million later. Did you say
Yeah.
10 million?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
10 million
I thought you
later.
said 1 million now or 1 million later. I was like, you'll go now.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 million later.
Okay. Long term. All right. Saltwater or freshwater?
Freshwater, but only because of the Atlantic salmon.
Yeah. Okay. So that leads us to the next one. In your opinion, the toughest fish to fish for?
Hermit.
Good question. Good answer. And then the toughest fish to fight?
Say tarpon.
Okay, good answer. Two of my favorites. One thing you've changed your mind on in the last 2 years?
Where I live.
Okay. And we'll get into that later, I guess. One thing you've learned in the last year that's made you money? Hopefully it's going to be how to write a book.
Yeah, how to write. Thank you for that one.
Yeah. Well, it could be how to write a book. We'll find out June 4th, I guess. One thing that you do daily that you can tell makes a difference in your health?
That's a good one. I'm not sure. I feel very unhealthy at the moment, but right now, I guess that I have a new passion, and that is gardening.
Okay.
Yes, I am at an age where I like gardening, and it's giving me like a new lease of life.
Great. Are you planting food or planting
Yes,
flowers or planting what?
I'm just planting food right now.
Okay. Very good.
So I guess that leads on to long-term health as well because it's all very healthy stuff.
Of course. But it's also like time flies and organizing and doing other things. It's like that's good for your brain. That's good
Yeah.
for all kinds of things. Would you have a reptile as a pet?
Yes.
Wow, a very enthusiastic yes. Have you had a reptile as a pet?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a pet snake and I also had a gecko.
All right. Very cool.
But
One,
I would really love to get another snake.
okay. Um, if you come to Florida, you can take home a, a python. We're trying to get them
Yes.
out of the Everglades. I'm sure that somebody would easily give you one.
Yeah.
One tool you could choose, or one tool you would choose to survive on an island.
One fishing tool.
Okay. Any kind of tool.
Probably a net.
That's not a bad one. It's
Like
not a bad
a
one.
big net, like a throw net, not
Yeah.
like a fishing net, because
Well,
that wouldn't get you far.
a cast net could be really good.
Yeah.
That could definitely feed you maybe. Okay, what was the most challenging thing about writing a book? One thing that was challenging about writing a book.
I think the time that it took and the time and energy that it took away from everything else in my life.
What was the easiest thing about writing a book?
The easiest or kind of nicest thing about it was that I was revisiting my life in a that perhaps part of it that I didn't want to revisit, but I did, and some of it, it was good to write about it. It was almost therapeutic. It's like
Yeah.
having a diary.
Yeah, for sure. Now everybody's going to get to read it. One way that you think that AI might change the future.
Make people dumb.
It's already making people dumber. A
Yeah.
movie that makes you laugh.
Makes me laugh. Uh, all I'm thinking is Yellowstone right now, but that doesn't really make me laugh. It makes me laugh, cry, and
Okay, well that's good.
and I've just finished it all.
Did you? Is it? I'm not caught up. It kind of lost me on the last season. I think I kind of fell off of it. But both my
But did
boys
you
were
watch?
living in Bozeman at the time too. So, like, I don't know. I had when you go there a lot, it's kind of like, well, this isn't really exactly Bozeman, but it's a great show nonetheless, right?
But did you watch 1883 and
Yes,
1923?
yes, even
Wow.
better. Both of them I thought were far better than the series. 1883
Yeah.
particularly was
Oh,
incredible, and
actually, yeah. When I finished, so I've watched them all, and when I finished Yellowstone the other day, I was lost. I didn't know what to do with myself because this has been my life. Like when I have that downtime, I'm all about Yellowstone or 1883, 1923,
yeah, well, that's what
and it
they're hoping,
was
so that when they do this next one, which is I think the
yeah.
4 6s they're going to come out with, that you'll be all in. I think there's going to be another one on what was his name, Jimmy that takes off to the 4 6s, and I think they're going to
Yeah.
follow him there and see
And
like what goes
Spencer,
on. Yeah.
another one of Spencer, please.
Yeah, yeah, that one. Yeah, we got to find out what happened to him. Like he's
I
got to come back
know.
and take care of all the stuff that's happening,
Yeah.
right? So they kind of left us
Yeah.
there. So that one, obviously, they're trying to figure out how they're going to produce all of those. But that guy Taylor
Mm.
Sheridan, he really hit his stride. I mean, he
Yeah.
really has just. I don't know where you get that kind of creativity and that ability to write like that,
Incredible.
but he's obviously done it. So
Mm.
you've been to some incredible destinations. What's another destination that you'd like to visit?
I would like to. I mean, so my favorite species is Atlantic salmon, and my second favorite species is a tarpon. And I haven't been tarpon fishing for, I think, it must be nearly 6 years. And
Hmm.
so I would love to do a tarpon trip again. And another one would be just, yeah, it's more salt water because I don't, I'm normally salmon fishing or trout fishing. So anything in the salt would be great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the tarpon is it's an incredible fish, and so many people um, just go absolutely nuts for it. That's
Yeah.
definitely one of my favorites too. Do you have a book that you have gifted more than once? Have you given someone a book more than once? The same book?
I've actually gifted Matching the Hatch. which is like the little pocket book.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you've got that in.
And the last question, one piece of advice that you live by.
I know it sounds really cringy, but be kind, calm as a bitch, be positive, as positive as you can, because life is hard. Life is hard for everyone, and in different circumstances, everyone has to go through, stuff all the time. And there are ups and downs, and just try and be positive and try and be as kind as you can.
I like it. I like it. So let's talk about your book a little bit. What was the motivation to write the book?
I actually didn't have any motivation because I didn't even think that I would be writing a book. And it was never, I mean, honestly, it was never really a goal of mine ever to write a book. I still feel, even today, I was thinking about the book and thinking that I would have loved to have had a few more years to write, because I felt there was definitely pressure to get it, finished. And I just feel like, I could have revisited it for another 3 years. But obviously, you have a time frame and you have to get it done. But I definitely would have loved a bit more time. But I'm proud of it. And but yeah, so one day a guy called Tris Payne from London, he contacted me asking if I wanted to meet. It was during COVID times. And Zoom was the thing, that we did from that day onwards. And so we met on a Zoom call, and he was asking, where I wanted to be and what I wanted to achieve. And then he asked whether I would ever write a book. And I said, I mean, I've never thought about it. And he said, oh, well, I think we have a story here. So anyway, he then got me to do a proposal, and we sent it out, and we sold it to a UK publisher, Hodder. And then they went out to US publishers, and then Simon and Schuster and Scribner. They bought it in the US. So yeah, it was crazy, because from one day to the next, my mind was free. I could do, I was writing articles, and then the next day I was writing a book. So everything changed completely. All my priorities.
Well, it's interesting how you put this together, and kind of the life cycle of the salmon, and then your own life cycle, and your relationships, and how we just all weave this all through life. And so is that something, like, did you come up with that idea of how you weave those together and kind of compare and contrast like that?
Yeah, my proposal that went out in the beginning was that every chapter was about a different species of fish. So the whole structure of the book and idea of the book changed whilst I was really writing or expanding on the proposal. And Atlantic salmon, for me, are the most, me personally, they hold a very special place, because I was brought up around a family that loved it so much. And then it kind of it's the species that has run through as a constant from when I was younger to now, and even more so now as well, because we lease a salmon beat. But I wanted to write about how incredible this species is, because my book is not really, and this is actually for me important to say to as many people as possible, it's not just a fishing book. It's more of a sort of personal journey. But within that personal journey, I hoped and I thought that a lot of people who didn't fish might read this book, because it's it's life's ups and downs, and there are fishing stories, but hopefully it's not too fishing orientated. And so I wanted these people who don't know anything about the Atlantic salmon, or fishermen who didn't know anything about the Atlantic salmon, to learn about them, so that perhaps there will be more people that care about them. Because it seems that they are in trouble, and they are just the most amazing species. And it's a bit like the eel. You know, the eel migrates thousands of miles, and it's the same as the Atlantic salmon. And it's just a shame to see that these species are endangered. And how could we let such an incredible species, you know, go down the drain like this? It's just very depressing. So, yeah, I wanted to, and you know, it as I was writing it, as I was writing about the Atlantic salmon, it made sense that it kind of correlated with my with growing up and going through some things, and yeah, so I wanted to intertwine both of them
Yeah.
together.
Well, I think you did a really good job, and I think there's a couple of interesting things here that I'd like to cover for this audience, because this is probably, well, we have people that listen all over the world, but I would say it's more of a saltwater audience. And like, do you know who Ted Williams is? He was a famous baseball player, and he wrote a book called The Big Three. And his big three were tarpon, bonefish, and Atlantic salmon. That's what he called the big three. And
Oh, cool.
that was my first kind of exposure to the Atlantic salmon, and I still have not fished for Atlantic salmon. You only have so much time, and I feel like I'm going to get there one day. But the Atlantic salmon is interesting to me. But I'd like to hear, like, especially that you grew up with your mom as a passionate Atlantic salmon fisherman. What is special to you about that fish? Why, like, and especially that you have fish for tarpon and bonefish and permit and milkfish and GTs and peacock bass and payara and all these other fish that are amazing. What is it? How does the Atlantic salmon stack up against all of those other fish? And what is it about the Atlantic salmon that drives you and other people like you to obsession?
It's such a good question. I think that there's so many reasons. I think that the spey casting with a double-handed rod is I personally think that this is the most beautiful cast to watch. And because, like, with a single-handed, you can spey cast. And so, you know, you can also spey cast with a single-handed rod to catch Atlantic salmon. And I was talking to someone else about this the other day, that you have two hands on the rod, so you feel very grounded. And there isn't this other hand doing a haul, or, you know, this like intense movement where it's like going away from your body. Whereas like a double-handed rod, and there's so many different shapes that you can do. So, you know, different casts, the snake roll, the snap casts, the double spay. There's so many different casts to learn. So you can't really, and it's kind of like all types of fishing techniques. It's really difficult to get bored of spay casting, because you've ticked off this level and then you go to the next and the next and the next and the next. And I think that for me, when you cast out with a double-handed rod and you're letting the fly swing, you are just concentrating on the swing, and you're thinking, wow, that was a good cast. Surely there's a fish there. Surely it's going to see my fly. And that's just going through your head the whole time. Or it was a bad cast and the fish is definitely not going to take. So the casting for me is, I mean, the importance of that is almost 50% of why I love it, I think. It's, for me, when I spey cast and I'm salmon fishing, I'm in my zen, I'm in like that meditative sort of feeling of just being in a very happy place. And the take of an Atlantic salmon is also just like the heart stopper, you know. It's because it's not like with with a big game fish, or with a GT or a tarpon, you're strip setting. Whereas an Atlantic salmon, you let it take the fly and you're not allowed to react. So there's these seconds where you are waiting to lift your rod, waiting for the salmon to turn or to go back into its lie. And that moment of, it's the most incredible feeling and also the worst feeling as well, because you don't know whether it's going to stay on. You don't know, but and they're very good fighters. But for me personally, this isn't. I don't think it's like one of my top three reasons why I love it so much. Because they are really great, and they can take you through pools and rapids and everything, and you're chasing. You get so addicted to the Atlantic salmon, but usually people who have never fished for them start fishing for them perhaps in the summer, where there's a lot of summer salmon around. You've got sea trout in quite a lot of the rivers, so you've got a chance of hooking fish, or multiple fish, or they start in the autumn, and there's all the fish are in the system, and they're quite aggressive, and they are ready to start spawning later in the year. But then there's this next sort of mission of catching a springer. And this is, people are out. There's a river in the Scotland that opens in January. So you're out there, sometimes in the snow, trying to catch the biggest, brightest spring fish. And there's just this ongoing addiction where there's, you can never have enough of it. And on top of all of that, you are fishing for something that has survived so much in the river, out at sea, back in the estuaries, back in the river, and then you have intercepted that fish, and then you get to see it go back. And when I was fishing when I was younger, we used to kill, most of our Atlantic salmon that we caught and took them home. And so fishing for them now is in a very different world. But actually, when I caught my first salmon when I was 11, I put it back. I had the choice. And so my kind of mentality was never to go fishing for Atlantic salmon to keep them. I have kept a few. I've gone to Iceland, and they have a sustainable run of fish. So I have taken fish from Iceland and the odd one in the UK. But now most rivers are all catch and release. And I would rather take a stocked fish. I don't know, in the US, you have stocked ponds where you can take fish for the table.
Yeah, you can, but I don't know a lot of. There are places for trout fishing where people are definitely routinely harvesting fish, and then you have these kind of put and take kind of fisheries where they'll stock a certain stream, and like people will go there, they'll actually follow the truck there. The truck puts the fish in the water. They're catching them out of the water as fast as they possibly can. And but then those type of fishermen aren't interested 2 weeks later, right? But then there are these holdovers that actually turn into more of a native acting fish, where they're not just eating fish food pellets and stuff like that, but they actually can start eating insects, and sometimes they can hold over. If the temperature is okay, they can hold over for a year, and then you have varying degrees of those type of fisheries, like the put and take type fisheries, but then you'll have, like, all over the Rocky Mountain West, catch and release only streams, fly fishing only streams, but there'll be places where people will harvest trout for sure. And but I think that the lakes lend themselves a little bit to that more than the rivers. But it's almost like self-governed at this point, to where people are just kind of like, man, we have so many tourists that come here that if everybody was keeping one fish, you have 800,000 people coming to this river in a summer. I don't know. You have a lot of people coming. If everyone kept one fish, there wouldn't be very many left. And I think that people kind of understand that, and there are places where people definitely are catching fish. Now in the ocean, it's much different, and we keep fish all the time in the ocean. And there are certain fish that we keep that are very sustainable. Hook and line, yellowtail snapper. I mean, that's why you're fishing for them. There's not a lot of catch and release yellowtail snapper fishing, right? Like, people want them for the dinner table. You're catching one at a time with a hook. They're hard to catch. That's why fluorocarbon line was even invented, was for the yellowtail snapper, because they get so finicky and they're hard to catch. But we don't keep permit very much. We don't keep, there's fish that we don't keep. But then there are fish that we do, and there's nothing wrong with that in the right circumstance. You know,
Yeah.
we want to eat them. Like it's the healthiest food, right? So we definitely want to eat them. But the Atlantic salmon, like from what I know about the Atlantic salmon, it doesn't seem like there are certain fish that you go fishing for, and they lend themselves. Maybe the yellowtail snapper is a good example. Jack crevalles are a good example. They lend themselves to catching a lot of them in a day. Tarpon, you can catch. You know, there are some on occasion you can catch quite a number of tarpon in a day. Most times you catch one, two in a day on fly. Permit, you know, it's a fish where you just kind of temper your expectations. Like if we catch one all week, that's a really good week. If we caught one a day, that would be amazing. Where do you put the Atlantic salmon in there as far as like expectations when people go and fish for the Atlantic salmon? Is it a one a day kind of thing? Is it a one a week kind of thing? Are there situations where you could crush them? You know, like I don't know. That's what I don't know about the Atlantic salmon.
I think that because your listeners are mostly saltwater based, I would say that the closest thing that you can get in terms of catches, uh, difficult, how hard it is to catch them, and how it feels to go fishing for them, it's like a permit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really like a permit because you could go fishing for them for a week and not catch anything. And then you could potentially catch, let's say, two or three in a week.
Okay.
But when you catch one, it's like, wow, what just happened? Like, that's crazy. Everyone goes crazy. Everyone's so happy for, well, most people are happy for other people. Some people get really weird when you catch a salmon and
Yeah.
you and especially online actually. I don't know whether the permit fraternity have this, but online the Atlantic salmon community are super bitchy.
Really?
Like, you know, if someone puts a fish up with the weight or the size or an estimate, and you know, other people will jump on that and say that it's not that, or you know, they're lying, or you know, they send death threats. Like, it's a really weird community because I think it's not, and it's not a weird community like, for example, the trout community where you don't give up your spots, because salmon fishing is you're fishing for migratory fish. So that salmon that you might have caught yesterday will not, well, will more than likely would have moved off tomorrow. So someone fishing there in the same place tomorrow will very unlikely catch the same fish
Mm-hmm.
because it's either moved off, it's not going to take another fly. So it's not like people keep the beats that they're fishing to themselves, or it's pretty open, an open book in that respect. But yeah, I mean, some people, it's all very weather dependent as well. So
Mm-hmm.
like you could be on a spate river and that river hasn't had any water for a long time, and suddenly it has water and it's summer and the fish have been stacking up below and they all come in, and you could potentially catch 10 to your rod,
So
you
that's
know,
that's
or
the
40
ultimate.
to a party.
That's the ultimate.
Sorry.
If it's been like no rain whatsoever, and then you get rain, then and you go and you hit that day perfectly. That's the ultimate situation. Would you think?
It just depends when it is. So it could be that's a situation for the summer on a spate river. But also like I don't know, I'm on the River Tyne, and which is in the north of England, and in the summer we can have low conditions, but you're fishing in little fast pockets, and you're fishing very early in the morning and late at night. And if you have an influx of water, that can bring in more fish, but also it gets the fish going again. You know, it freshens up the water. The fish feel like they want to move again. So you are very weather water dependent.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, some of these rivers that, let's say, I don't know, are in Scotland, you could be paying a lot of money to be there. But then there's lots of places that are also super cheap. You could be on association water, which would could cost, you know, 20 quid a day, or you could get, yeah, like, I don't know, you could be invited fishing, salmon fishing. Like it's a very, we have this thing called Fish Pal. So basically you can look at all the rivers, well, most of the rivers in the UK, especially for sea trout and salmon, and you can book on. Now, the one thing that's bad about FishPal is that people sit there and they wait for the catch reports. And if nothing's happening, then they won't book. Whereas back in the day, people used to just book their fishing and go. And whatever the weather, whatever the river conditions, they would fish. Whereas now people are very skeptical and they wait for the conditions. So, yeah, I mean, it's very complex. Salmon fishing, like permit fishing, you can book your tides or book your week, depending on whether you have a holiday or whenever you want to go at a different time of year. But with salmon fishing, it's so weather dependent. But if you don't get your fly in the water, then you're never going to catch a fish. So it's better to turn up than to not.
I mean, that would be the question that so many people would ask when, you have a client, a good client, they're like, should I come on, this tide or this tide? And there are situations where, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for this very specific thing, this is the deal. But in the Florida Keys, we have a tide difference of 4 to even much longer than that, 4 to 8 hours. So it might be low tide on the ocean, and it's not going to be low tide in the backcountry for another 4 hours after that. So you have every variation of tide in between there. And if you know the tides well, you can, if it's low on the ocean, that doesn't mean that it's low everywhere. You're going to have water other places. And that would always be the kind of answer is like, look, man, I'm going fishing every day, whether it's weather or not. And you can have the perfect tides, the absolute perfect tides. But if it's blowing 30 and raining, I would rather have a day when the weather's nice and the tides are, we're gonna find a place to fish. Now, what we can't do anything about is the weather, right? So I would also say that you could have perfect weather and perfect tides in January, and you have less of a chance of catching the fish. If you're coming down for tarpon, you have less of a chance of catching that fish, the big migrators. It's just not really happening the same at that time of the year. So, I don't know, just roll the dice, come down at the best time of the year for what you want. And then book the best guide that you can possibly get, because the guide, in our situation, the guide dictates more, I think, than the tide or even the weather. Like you can have a great weather day, perfect tides, perfect weather, not a very good guide, and you don't catch any fish. Or you have the best guide, and on the worst day, that person is producing. So it's kind of interesting like that.
Actually, if we compare the Atlantic salmon to the permit or the tarpon, with an Atlantic salmon, they are, because they don't generally feed in when they get into the river. Like, I don't believe that a salmon goes straight from the ocean and the first week of it being in the river, it's like, I'm not going to snap at something that looks like food.
Right.
But when they are in the river for as soon as they kind of get into the river, their body starts going through changes and therefore ends up not basically starving itself until it lays its eggs or the male comes and fertilizes them. So they don't feed in the river. So you are basically hoping that your fly is either going to excite them, annoy them, surprise them, but it's not, generally speaking, taking because it wants to eat that the food when it's in the river. So you're fishing for a fish that doesn't eat in the river or doesn't need to. And there are so many theories why a fish takes, why it doesn't. But even the best caster and the best fisherman might not catch a fish, and that like 1 week, and could be fishing with someone who has never casted before and has gone out and caught the Atlantic salmon. There's stories this year of 2 salmon on our beat, one of which was caught in inches off the bank when the fly didn't go out and it got stuck and started going upstream. And a 17-pound fish took the fly. Another one of one of our guests getting stuck in the tree, and they with their first cast with a single-handed rod and pulled the rod forwards, hit the rock, pulled it off the rock, bam, into a salmon. So salmon fishing, you just have to be lucky. Yeah, it helps if you can cast, and it helps that you can get the fly as far as you can and turned over perfectly, precision, swinging methodically through the pool. But if you prefer the spaghetti route, could catch a fish if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So there's no like it's a puzzle for everyone. It's not like you get to this level and you're like, you start catching heaps and heaps of fish.
Well,
it's like you have to work and you have to be lucky.
Permit fishing's a lot the same. One of the best days of permit fishing that I ever guided, we go out, we're trying to catch barracudas. And the barracudas aren't around, and a cold front had just come through, and I'm expecting to catch barracudas with this guy. They're not around, and the permit are all over the place. And I'm like, I didn't bring any crabs, for spin fishing. So I do have a fly rod in here. I guess I could teach you how to fly fish, and we could try to catch these because there's nothing else really around to fish for. And sure enough, he caught one. And, he learns how to fly fish. He can barely get it past his feet, but he catches a permit, right? And the week before, I had a rep for one of the rod companies that can put it in a teacup at 90 feet, and he didn't catch one. I mean, it's not, it always doesn't happen that way. It's funny that these fish aren't eating, but the fly design for Atlantic salmon has to be some of the most beautiful flies for any fish at all. And I wonder where that came from. If you're not even, I mean, I guess you're mimicking something, or the old fly tyers are like, well, I guess it kind of needs to look like a fish or kind of needs to look like something. I don't know. But Atlantic salmon flies are truly a work of art. Like when you see really beautiful ones, and you can have like a coffee table book and have never gone Atlantic salmon fishing and will never go in your entire life, but you can look at that and go, I don't even know what that is, but that thing is beautiful. Like the colors and just the way that the proportions and everything is, and it's obviously like an activity of the fly tying for the Atlantic salmon that has evolved into this art form. And like American trout fishing, everything, it has done the same. It's evolved into this art form, but everything is designed to be ultra realistic, or to look more and more like exactly what they're eating, or what they might be eating, or what exists in the stream. How did Atlantic salmon fly tying develop into what it is, what we see today?
It's a really good question. I have no idea who was the first person to tie a Atlantic salmon fly, but I guess they used to have much bigger rods and split cane. So these flies the classic patterns were tied on a single hook, and that single hook was huge compared to what we fish with now. So sometimes we're fishing with, size 18, tiny little flies.
Really?
And they used to fish with these huge single hooks. And actually, if I could recommend a film right now for people who would like to, know a little bit of history, or just watch something that's incredibly well done and beautiful to watch, it's Kiss the Water, and it's about Megan Boyd. And have you watched it?
No, I don't know that book.
It is amazing. So this woman in Scotland she's one of the most famous tyers in the UK that's ever been, ever lived. And she used to tie, she recently, a few years ago died, sadly, but she was quite old as well. So she had a great life, but she tied flies for the royal family. And they were so beautiful. She actually was invited down to Buckingham Palace by the Queen, and she said she politely declined because I think she had to look after her dogs, or she said that she needed to stay home because no one was going to be there to look after it. So yeah, it's just a wonderful story. And yeah, highly recommend it. Kiss the Water.
Okay.
All about Megan Boyd.
Well, I'm sure people will check that out. That brings up the question that I had written down earlier about access for Atlantic salmon. And you mentioned these different things that you have, like public water, I guess, and then there, I know that there's a tremendous amount of private water. for the Atlantic salmon that can be very, very difficult to access and expensive. And like, what can, like, if somebody's getting started in Atlantic salmon fishing in your area, is it something that's attainable to people, or do you need to know people, or do you need to, like, how? That's one of the challenges that we've had with some of the fishing in the United States of getting kids or people into the sport, and one of the big kind of factors is they don't know where to go. They don't know how to access water. And so there's been a lot of attempts to make it easier for people to understand that there are public ponds and there are public areas where you can go and fish and actually catch lots of fish. What about the access for Atlantic salmon?
So pretty much, I mean, I don't know the percentage, but I would say it's almost 100% of the waters in like rivers and lakes are all private. So you buy, whoever owns this water or whoever leases the water, you have to buy a fishery ticket from them. Now there are syndicates or association water. So in your local area, you just have to do some digging and find out who runs the syndicate or association. Association syndicate. And then you can. Some are really hard to get on, and you have to go on a waiting list, and some you can walk straight in. But another way is buying a single fishery ticket for a particular day. And there's FishPal, like I mentioned earlier on, or maybe a local estate might have water that you can buy tickets directly with them. But generally speaking, the whole of the UK, you have to find out who owns the water before going on there.
And that's
It's
not
not
just
like
for
parts of America.
It's not just for Atlantic salmon, but for all species. I know carp fishing is really big over there too. So you have to, even for carp and for everything, you have to go through all that. What about your?
There are certain town stretches, like canals are free to fish.
Okay.
And there are certain stretches of rivers in cities and towns where there is free water, but it's quite unusual, and especially for salmon, most places you have to buy a fishery ticket.
Have you come over to the Rocky Mountains and fished here? Oh, you have to do
I
it.
haven't.
I mean, I can't
know.
even imagine what that would feel like to have all that private water, and then to go to a state like Idaho, and like in the United States, when we have maps that show where public land is, and that public land is green usually. And you can look at a state, and that's why Idaho is one of my favorite states, because it's almost entirely green. Almost entirely. Like, there are a few places that are private, obviously, and Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, all of that area is amazing like that. But I mean, you can go to like Yellowstone National Park. Anywhere you see, you can fish. It's just amazing. It's so amazing. And there's literally lifetimes of water that even if you just decided this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, I'm going to try to walk every stream in Yellowstone that's available to fish. Good luck. I mean, good luck, really. It's just amazing. But I would love to see that. That would be really cool. I think that would be a good book. From that perspective, because I think in the United States, I think a lot of times we take for granted what we have. Like, you can just go fishing anywhere in the ocean for the most part, and we have a ocean all the way around, and then I mean, if there's a boat ramp there, you're good to go. Like, you put your boat in, and you can pretty much go anywhere. And there's so many different situations where, like, the state will own, like a landowner might own the water. Well, nobody owns the water. They might own the riverbed, so you can't get out and wade. But in certain states, but in other states, it's at the high water mark. So as long as, like, and that's most of the year, it's well below that. So if you can get public access, you can walk right into anywhere you want, as long as you're under the high water mark in a state like Montana. And a lot of the landowners aren't really great with it, but they know, okay, well, you're within the law, and that's okay. But you can access some amazing fishing like that, and it's really
Okay. So in America, like, for example, if you wanted to go and fish in Montana, how much would it be to fish there?
Probably an out-of-state fishing license. You could probably get either a day, a 3-day, a 7-day, or maybe you would have to buy an out-of-state license, and an out-of-state license might be a couple $100. A day license is probably $30-$25
Okay.
just for the day. Now, a lot of times, also you might, if you don't know what you're doing, you might want a guide as well, and the guides can be more expensive, of course, but you don't always have to have a guide.
Yeah.
So much of what you can do in the United States, you can totally do on your own. DIY, and there are books and websites and social
Yeah.
media
Yeah.
accounts and all kinds of stuff that help to do that. But even then, like if you're willing to walk and you're willing to walk further than somebody else, you can have it to yourself for the most part.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, you should. That's definitely on the list. I mean, of all these great places that you've been, the Rocky Mountain West, I would say is you should definitely put that on your list, just because you can camp a lot of places. Like you can have like a car and a tent and fishing rods, and man, you can go and just camp in all these different places. And sometimes, like we have the Bureau of Land Management, which is a big organization that owns tons of land, but it's all public. They have certain camping restrictions. The National Forest has certain type of camping restrictions. The national parks have certain type of camping restrictions. Those restrictions definitely have to be respected. So, like in the national park, you need to go check in someplace and be, say, I need a available camp spot. Sometimes it costs a little bit of money. Sometimes it doesn't. And you can camp in that designated area. In the national forest, a lot of times you can camp anywhere. In the BLM, there are designated areas, but they're free. But you just have to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Some places you can't have fire, some places you can. But for the most part, once you get all that stuff ironed out, you can spend the whole summer just bumming around and fishing.
So
It's
cool.
amazing. I mean, it is
So cool.
so amazing. And then we have
Yeah.
such great stuff in the saltwater too. But
Yeah. You have it all. You really have it all. And actually, I missed that earlier. That I have always wanted to do a US road trip, and in the back of my mind, I thought that I would have to sort of save up quite a bit of money. But actually, you could probably do it, on the cheap if
man,
you camp
especially
and.
with so many people that and your association with Yeti and other things. I mean, yes, there's definitely places that you would want to pay to go to, and there's certainly, opportunities that you would be like, yeah, I want to go with this particular guide in this area, and I'm going to see things that if I don't do that, I'm not going to see otherwise. But man, there's so much, especially as trout fishing. Like trout fishing, you can do on foot. There's plenty of rivers that fish way better out of a drift boat or a raft than and are almost completely inaccessible to the wade fishermen, right? Big steep canyon that you can't
Canyons,
even get
yeah.
into, and you can float through, but you can't. It's really really difficult to walk in there, or maybe there's just no access. But other than that, I mean, there's just so much that you can do. It's really amazing. And I think a lot of times we take that for granted, that we just have that. It's just
You have
you
everything.
just have
You're
it.
so
What other
lucky.
country
Yeah.
have you been to that you feel like has tremendous fishing opportunities?
I do love Brazil. So we've just taken a hosted trip to Brazil.
Where do you go there?
And so we go to the
Okay.
Aquaboa Lodge, but you fly into Manaus, and I would highly recommend staying in Manaus for a few days. There's a lot to see, and also the Amazonian cuisine is honestly my favorite food in the whole entire world. And some of the things that they use in their dishes you can't get anywhere else. So yeah, I would highly recommend. But just because I love the wildlife that surrounds fishing, and being in Brazil, it's like a river safari, because you are seeing so much, and the noises that come out, and you're seeing things that just make you go wow and talk about it for the next day. Things that just make you so happy, and it's all simple things. It's like a family of otter that cross the river and run along the beach, like just things that there's such the simple pleasures of life. And also the fishing, obviously, for
What
peacock bass is
are
very
you targeting
exhilarating.
mostly peacock bass, or is
Yeah,
there a bycatch there? I saw looked like a pretty recent payara on your
yeah.
Instagram. Is that another fish that you're fishing for in Brazil, or is that another place?
So you can catch catfish, payara, arapaima,
Mm,
lots of different species of peacock bass, but the main ones are peacock bass. But yeah, you can catch all the other ones as well. So and arowana, which is like
mm-hmm.
the that like
Yeah,
snaky looking
yeah, I
one.
know those.
But yeah,
They
it's
jump and get
yeah,
stuff out of trees. Like so,
yeah,
they're an amazing, uh, they're amazing fish, and
mm,
they eat all kinds of flies. I think, but that's another thing that we have that a lot of people take for granted too is the peacock bass around
yeah,
Miami and around
yes,
all over South Florida and in
mm,
public ponds and canals and all kinds of places in the Everglades. Public areas where you can go catch those, and certainly
yeah,
private areas too. But really some big ones. But Brazil is definitely on my list. That whole peacock bass, golden dorado, all of that fishing is really good. I really had a good time in Australia when I fished there,
mm,
and I don't know about how much public access we had there, but I did a trip there that was just it it will always remain as one of my favorite trips ever. And so
where did you
Australia,
go?
well, we went to the Bay of Carpentaria. So Australia is almost exactly a mirror of the United States in this way that it has like this peninsula that goes off to the north towards the equator of,
Mm-hmm,
and that's like Florida, right? And
mm-hmm,
so the United States has Florida that comes off to the south towards the equator, and they're about equidistant. So when I got there, I noticed that the vegetation was almost exactly the same. If it wasn't exactly the same plant, it looked very, very, very similar. The
yeah,
flowers, the palm trees, everything just looked just like South
wow,
Florida. And we kept going further north. As we were going further north, it was like going further south in the United States. And then
mm,
they had all these fish, but we got on a mothership and went all the way to the top of that, and then hopped back down. I guess we were moving south. Um, so the further north we went, that was like going south in the United States. So as we went
mm,
south, it was kind of like going north in the United States. So
mm,
it would be like hopping up Florida, and we would stop at these river mouths, and there would be all these different fish that you could catch. And I think we caught over 50 different species of fish on that trip.
mm.
It was amazing. Um, some fish
Love
were
that.
similar to the fish I mean, all of the fish that we caught down there were similar to a fish that we catch in the United States and in Florida. There was only
Mm,
one species that was exactly the same, and that was the cobia. The cobia
mm,
was
mm-hmm,
a cobia there was a cobia here, but a permit there was slightly different. It was an Indo-Pacific permit that was slightly different, had a little different nose on it,
mm-hmm,
and honestly, they were easier to catch. They were easier to catch. Their behavior was a little bit different than our permit. They were still hard to catch, and we didn't catch a lot of them, but there were, we had those. But then they had a fish that was like a tarpon, which didn't grow as big as our tarpon, but it was
mm.
like an oxeye herring, I think is
Yeah,
what they
yeah,
called it,
yeah,
and it was, maybe a couple pounds, but they were very
yeah.
easy to catch. So, like where we get into baby tarpon, and we're like, oh right, we caught one. These were like, oh, we caught 20. It was
But is that because of the fishing pressure?
no,
Is there a
I
lot of
don't think
fishing
so.
pressure?
I think they just had different habits, different. While they look like a tarpon, doesn't necessarily mean that they act like our tarpon. They were pretty. You threw a fly in there and you got bit. I mean, it was
Mm,
pretty easy. But then we had another fish there that was like a snook, which is the barramundi, and that is a tough
mm,
fish.
yeah.
I really liked the barramundi. And
Hmm.
we have one place in Florida that we can catch barramundi. It's like a stock pond, but it's really cool. And you can go there and you can experience this fish that you would only find in Australia. Very tough fish, very very mean and tough fish. Um, Armor, like big scales. Have you caught those barramundi? They're
No.
they're they're a tough fish. Lots of
What about
spines.
Did you have blue bastards, or is that somewhere else?
We did not have those. Now I saw those. I see my friend Jaco Lucas. Do you know him?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he was
Yakko.
he catches those somewhere. I don't know. Maybe the Seychelles. I was thinking it was the Seychelles where they
I
had
think it's
those.
Australia.
Australia
Yeah,
could be. Yeah, we didn't see those, but we
yeah.
saw a lot of other things, and it was just cool to be on that mothership and to be someplace where. I mean, we saw maybe a couple of other boats and had no idea where they would have possibly come from. And when we're flying into
Incredible.
this area, you look down and it's like getting dark, and there's not a single light anywhere that we're flying over. I mean, it's completely dark. It was the coolest thing. And, that's one thing that while we do have so much incredible fishing and areas, there are a lot of areas that are developed in the United States. And until you get to a place like Yellowstone
Mm,
or a giant national park like that, the Everglades is like that. There's not a single light bulb anywhere. There's not, there's no one around. And
mm,
yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what about carp? Do you ever fish for carp?
Yes. Well, I used to actually do more. I haven't been for ages, but there was a stage where I was obsessed with them. They were my guilty pleasure, and I loved. I've done it with like carp fishing style,
Mm-hmm.
with boilies, but I
What's a
also have done
boilie?
a lot. A boilie is sort of, it can come in different flavors, and it's a ball,
Okay.
and you put it on your hook, so
Yeah.
it's coarse fishing, but carp fishermen like to say carp fishing, not coarse fishing.
Yeah.
And then I've done way more of carp on the fly.
Now, is that something that I mean, like we have carp on the fly in the United States, and it's a lot like a red fishing. Like when we go red fishing, they're tailing, and people are sight casting them in some of these lakes that it's very clear. Is that like, do you have some of that carp fishing opportunity there?
Yeah, it can be. I've heard that you have more river carp fishing than us, and wild carp fishing. Whereas most of our carp, unless they're escapees, most of them are stocked.
Mm.
And so you can, I mean, where in the summer you literally see them sunbathing in the shallows.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're fun, and they're really, really strong, and they are actually not as easy as they look, because they come up and they just torment you by pushing your fly around and not taking it, or they're really strong. So you're fishing with 6 or 7 weights sometimes, depending on, because a lot of fisheries stock bigger carp, so
Mm.
you know that you need to take a bigger, heavier rod. But I think the carp world here is very different to yours, because we stock, we have these, like, carp fishing is I think, one of the biggest sectors of the sport of
Yeah.
fishing here.
Crazy about it over there. They're
Crazy,
crazy about it. The
crazy.
first time I
Did you?
saw it, do you know that? Do
I
you know that publication called Angling Times? I'm sure you do. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so. My sister lived in England, and she sent me a few Angling Times, and that looks like the National Enquirer for us. The National Enquirer is this magazine that's sitting at the checkout counter at every supermarket, and it's just tabloid. Whatever the latest star got in trouble for or whatever, and it's the same font and the same
Yes.
colors and the same everything. And she sent me these things, and I'm like, is this a joke? Like, but it's not a joke. They are so serious about carp fishing over there, and I think it's really cool. Like, because they're obviously hard to catch. And they,
Yeah.
they go into all these little recipes. Like we go into recipes about
Yeah.
tying a fly or how to cast, and you read that, and it's like all these recipes about, I guess, the boilies
Boilies.
and all of the
Yeah.
different things that you use. I found it fascinating, but also was very thankful that we have so much water that carp fishing is something that we can do if we want to, but don't necessarily have to do.
I heard on the grapevine as well that carp fishing is one of the main reasons people get divorced in the UK.
Because they're so into it.
Because when you go, so again, this is why it's different to you guys, is that most carp fishermen go to, well, I don't want to overgeneralize here, but a lot of carp fishermen go to carp lakes and they stay at the carp lake in their tent, their bivvy. The tent is called a bivvy.
Yeah.
And some husbands, I guess, go away for longer than the wife wants them to.
Well, we have a similar phenomenon. I think it's in ice fishing, where on a lot of our lakes, it gets so cold that the ice gets many feet thick, and it'll stay like
Yeah.
that all winter long. And so people will go and put these houses out there, and
Yeah.
they have heaters in them, and I think a lot of people use it as a place to go drink heavily and spend the weekend away from their wives, or maybe away
Or
from their husbands. Exactly right. It's equal opportunity staying away out there. But I know that we've gone on a little longer. I've enjoyed this conversation. I want to hear the story about the ring or the rods. Because it's crucial to your book, and it's also crucial to your story of you did something similar to me. Like when I went to college, I got away from fishing. I fished with my dad when I was growing up a little bit, but I got away from fishing and started, partying and doing other things, and I didn't think about it. And then something drew me back, and I went to Yellowstone and worked in Yellowstone because I wanted to go fishing there. I wanted to fly fish for trout. And it changed my whole life. It changed everything about the entire trajectory of my life and sent me in this entire different direction. And fishing becomes a career and a passion. And I don't know what my life would have been had I not found it. And when I was reading your book, I was like, that's, it's kind of similar story to where you find yourself in this store with your mom. And I wonder if you would just kind of tell that story. I found it really, really crucial to your story in your book.
Yeah, so isn't it amazing how fishing can just deeply change people's lives, and so many millions of people? It just and yeah, saves a lot of people as well. So I was so I guess from like through my late teens, my parents, so my dad and my mum, had told me that when I was turned 21, I would get something that would last me forever, and it would be like an heirloom, and it would most likely be jewelry. It would be a piece of jewelry that I would keep forever and pass down to generations. And then after that, it would be, like there would be no big presents. It would be the last proper present that I would receive. And so when I think it was like actually before I turned 21, my mum was, my dad, and my mum were both asking me what I would like. And my mum said, well, let's just go shopping and see if we find anything we like. And we were in this little tiny shop in a place called Store on the World, which is in the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire, where I was brought up. And we were looking around, and tried on this ring because I didn't have any rings, so I was maybe maybe I could have a ring because that's a nice thing to pass down, and found this ruby ring and it looked nice. And then there was just a feeling that it's an expensive thing, and I just thought, let's just think about this and we can always come back. And then the person in the shop, they're always a little bit pushy, especially if they know that you're looking at something and you like it. Anyway, so left the shop, and it wasn't actually until after I had turned 21, because I kept on umming and ahhing, and my parents kept on asking me, and I just said, well, let's just wait. And I just kind of pushed it back and back further and further. And then after I turned 21, that's when I was back in the UK. And I think that actually, I feel like New Zealand the fishing was brewing in New Zealand, but towards the end. And then when I came back to the UK and I was living in London, I had a time where I was really miserable, and but I was partying a lot, so my life was just chaotic. And then I think probably a few months after my 21st birthday, my mum, I can't even remember, it was like the chicken or the egg, whether I think my mum actually invited me to go to Scotland. And I think my mum said, why don't we try and get you some fishing rods? And as soon as she said it, that was it. Like I was like, that's such a good idea because then they'll be mine. I'll have my own rods, and those are going to last me forever as well. And that was it. I got a Sage one double-handed rod and a Graze single-handed rod. And I still have my Sage rod. Unfortunately, my friend had my Graze rod and it got taken. Their car was broken into and
Oh
my
man.
rod was taken. But yeah, so that was really, and I think when you get your own rods, there's like a sense of ownership over, like it becomes your hobby rather than you're just borrowing people's rods and it never really feels very serious. Whereas if you are given a rod or you buy a rod, you have to go and use it really. Some people don't. Some people it stays in the cupboard for a long time. But it's definitely for most people the way to fish more is to get your own stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the case with me.
And so when you get your own stuff, then you launch into this exploration and
Yeah.
learning, and that
Yeah.
that kind of set you off on this path of well, I can do that. I don't need to rely on someone to take me. I can just go to this place, right? And you get better and better and better at it, and eventually you decide that you want to do it for a living in some way. And probably like me, you had no idea exactly what that looked like at first, but
Yeah.
I don't know. What did that look like to you? How did you
Well,
decide that was something that you wanted to get more into and maybe possibly make money with?
well, just before I go into that, isn't it funny when you look back on time and you think that it would be amazing to go through all of that learning phase where of course we're all learning still now, and I've got so much to learn in different fields, but the first time where you go out by yourself or you go with a friend and you need to learn that knot and you're fishing and you need to learn it on the job, and it's something so special about that. And actually I if I had the chance, I would turn back time and do it all over again, because almost those bits were even better. Because actually, when you then get, like for us, we're in the industry and this is our life, but actually those like really simple challenges are not as special or sort of, I don't know, not special, but nostalgic, or you're so keen, but you don't know that much.
Right.
And that you just start learning so much so quickly, and you're like a sponge because there's so much to learn. Whereas now, we've got this sort of our brain is full of information.
Yeah. At this point,
and
it's
we're
like if you
bringing
can
in.
learn one new thing a day, that would be
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly.
But what you're talking about is like you go someplace and you learned 100 new
Yeah,
things.
right.
And you're like, oh, now I can do this and this and this and this and this, and I had no
Yeah.
idea. Like that whole journey is the most incredible part of it. And what would
So
be
cool.
amazing about rewinding time is to be able to realize, like at that time, like this is the best it's going to be, because there's a temptation and a tendency for you to be very frustrated a lot of times. Like those people are catching fish and I'm not catching them, and I'm stuck in the trees all the time, and this is so frustrating. And then all of a sudden, boom, something happens. And you learn
Yes.
something, and then you learn something else and something else. And then you start putting these couple things together, maybe in a different place on a different day. You're like, well, last time I tried this and it worked. That's the best. That's the best
Yeah.
ever. But at the
Yeah.
time, it's also full of frustration. And
Yeah.
like if I could wind back time, it would be like to re-experience all of those things, but to realize how good it actually is and not be
Right.
frustrated.
Right.
But
And
maybe it wouldn't be good if you weren't frustrated. Like maybe that's what
Yeah.
makes it the best, is like you're overcoming these things, you're overcoming these fears, you're overcoming these challenges, these frustrations, and maybe that's actually the beauty of the whole thing.
it is.
That you wished didn't, I mean, and wishing that that didn't happen, maybe you wouldn't be sitting right here right now,
Yeah,
or like,
because it was too easy
yeah,
or
yeah.
not as frustrating as it actually is. But also, like back then, my life, so I was working in an office 9 to 5, and when I went fishing, this was all I was thinking about. Whereas when I'm fishing now, I'm thinking, oh my God, have I sent that email? Have I got, and it's all like all fishing related stuff, but it's like there's so much admin, and I don't have the same feeling when I first went out more than 10 years ago by myself. That's all I was thinking about. Whereas now, so much work involved with actually working in the industry that sometimes that's, yeah, and when you go on a fishing trip and there's, crappy Wi-Fi, that's the best because that's the time where you can just concentrate on the fishing and not worry about anything else.
I can tell you this though, because I'm just a little bit older than you, that there will be a time, just like you're looking back on, wouldn't it be amazing to go back and experience all of that learning? There will be a time when you look back and go, wouldn't it be incredible if I could go back and go on one of those fishing trips where all I was thinking about was, did I send that email, or did I do this or did I do that? And I was building my career. And then, I don't know. I think it's the same. I think it's the
true.
same kind of little thing is like, enjoy the journey. Like enjoy it right now, and you're thinking like, wouldn't it be great if I could go back and do it this way? But I'm telling you right now, you're in the best of it right now. Just like you look back and go, oh, all those frustrations, that was the best part. That was the best part. Right now, the frustrations that you're having and the things that you're thinking about as you're building your career, and you just wrote this book and you're about to take off. Like this is as good as it gets. Like just enjoy the journey, man. It's
enjoy the journey wherever you are.
That's right. That's right. But that's the hardest thing for so many people. Like even right now, whatever I'm doing right now, in 20 years, I'm going to look back and think, man, remember that day I did that podcast with Marina Gibson? That was the best ever. Maybe that's what we'll say.
I doubt that's going to be.
No, man, you're about to go crazy. This book is going to take off. So the other thing that I was thinking about too is that in your book, like when you got the rods and you started and you had this little place that you were going, that's when it really is incredible. Just like we're talking about these little periods in your career or periods in your fishing life where you finally get your gear and then you find this place that you can go anytime you want, right? And maybe there's somebody there, but then there's another place up the street. And then you have the freedom to make mistakes and the freedom to lose a fish and the freedom to try something without asking somebody, is it a good idea if I try this fly, or is it a good idea, should I maybe do this, or I'm going to walk out a little deeper, or you're able to have the freedom to make all those mistakes on your own. That's the good stuff. And that's when you really start learning, because you can go with a guide and the guide is going to shortcut so many things for you. They're definitely going to shortcut so many things, and you're going to learn really pretty fast. But if all you're doing is learning from a guide and being on the best water at the best time at the best on the best day, using the right fly, with the perfect rod, the perfect leader, the right knot, everything's perfect, that person will catch lots of big fish, but they will never be as good as the person that learned it all the way on their own.
Absolutely. It's a bit like casting as well. If you learn to cast through, weekly casting instruction lessons, then you're going to be a good caster, but not as good as the self-taught person who has, learnt to cast underneath vegetation to get to that trout. And they learn because they know, okay, I need to get under that. How am I going to do that? And they think for themselves rather than being like, you have to do this because of this. And
well, I think in that situation, a lot of times people say, well, you can't get it under the bush because no one's ever shown them how to do it. So if you could do it, I would have learned. I've had lessons every week for the last 2 years. If I could have learned that, I would have learned that, where the other person has no restrictions whatsoever. Creativity, more creativity.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, this has been really great, and we should definitely do it again because I don't even think we started to scratch the surface. But I know that people are going to really like this. And I meant to get your Instagram and everywhere that people can find you. Tell everybody where they can find you, and maybe I'm sure there's people in England right now that might want to go fishing on your beat. I wanted to get to that about what your outfit looks like and what you do, but we'll save that for the next time.
Awesome. Well, so my social media channels are just Marina Gibson Fishing. And then if you want to look at my fishing school, that's northernfishingschool.com. And then if you want to find us and come fish salmon fishing with us, then we're on the River Tyne, and that's bywellsalmonfishing.com. But all of it's on my social media bio or whatever. So,
okay.
Yeah.
How long are your fishing schools?
So we run 365 days a year. So we are open the whole time. So you can come for a day, you can come for half a day, you can come for a week. We have beginners courses which run for usually 2 days, but you can book in for a whole week if you wanted to. We have salmon fishing, trout fishing. We've got some course fishing in a lake. So yeah, there's just loads of different options.
Interesting. Yeah. And is it right there on the River Tyne?
So no, it's actually in North Yorkshire. The River Tyne, we moved to Northumberland, which is about an hour and a half away from the school. So I have a manager at the school, and now we are very heavily involved with the salmon fishing beat. I needed to be close to the Atlantic salmon, so that's why we moved.
Yeah, good for you. You know what's different? One other, I mean, there's many differences between the UK and the United States, but one is that you call it the River Blank, and we call it Blank River.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
Like the River Colorado, it's the Colorado River. It's the River Mississippi.
Yeah, right.
It's the Mississippi River. Right. Like
that makes
Why? How did it happen like that? I don't know.
I have no idea, and it would be weird if I said, "Well,
the Tyne River."
Yeah. Your river. No, it would be so weird if I said that.
Yeah.
Like Tyne River.
Yeah.
No.
Well, that's how it would be over here. I don't think there's a single place that's the case that we would call it the river something in the United States. The river.
But we also we weigh ourselves in stone.
Yes.
So
yeah, but that's a totally different unit of measure, right? Like that's not just like well, there's pronunciation differences and even spelling differences on something like favorite, right? Like favorite.
Like the US publisher had to go through the whole book and edit all the spelling.
Of course, I didn't think about that, but well, this is a big publisher. This is a big publisher, Scribner and Simon and Schuster. That's a big publisher. So I really wish you all the best with this book. If you're interested in books about fishing or books about really life and making decisions, like we talk about that so much on the podcast about people that decide that they don't want to go down this one road and they do this other thing. And they don't, they're going to quit their job and they're going to become a guide, or they're going to quit their job and they're going to become an artist, or they're going to quit their job and do something different. And I love to hear about those moments of deciding that, you know what, I would rather not make any money and do this than more of this. And there's a lot of people that have done extremely well, yourself included, by making that change.
Thank you.
So it's really great talking with you.
Thank you so much.
And certainly good luck with the book. It's coming out June 4th, so guys, go check it out.
Thanks so much, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Marina.
It was great to be here.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for this week. We'll be back with another guest next week. See ya.